Germany's Wetten, dass is the single largest television show in Europe, with 10 million eager viewers tuning into each broadcast. When translated to English, the title reads, Wanna Bet?, which may give you a clue as to what the program is about. While Wetten, dass operates much like any other variety show featuring interviews with celebrity guests and musical performances, it does have a twist. The entire program revolves around a unique game show concept. Ordinary members of the public would come onto the show to propose a bet, one that would require them to pull off some outlandish feat live on the air. The bets would range from people trying to show off their great knowledge of a certain topic to large-scale stunts involving big machinery. The celebrity guests would place a wager on whether or not the feat would be successful. If they guess wrong, they have to do something embarrassing on live TV. At the end of the night, the audience votes on which stunt they thought was the most entertaining, with the winner being crowned the Bet King and taking home the grand cash prize. While it was undoubtedly successful, competing programs with similarly exciting formats were becoming a threat to Wetten, dass' ratings. To stay ahead, the producers tried to keep increasing the spectacle and danger level of the bets, leading to the show garnering a reputation for being reckless. Critics would speculate on how long it would be until something bad would happen live on air. The December 4th installment of Wetten, dass featured a particularly harrowing bet. 23-year-old aspiring stuntman Samuel Koch asserted that he could perform a somersault over a moving vehicle by using a set of spring-loaded boots. But that's not all he had to pull off. On the show, he would attempt to flip over 5 different cars, one after the other, each one increasing in size to level up the difficulty with each jump. The host Thomas Gottschalk would tell the audience that Samuel had a mere 4 minutes to achieve this. Koch was determined. In the months leading up to the show, he had completed over 500 similar jumps in order to prepare for it. He personally selected the vehicles he would flip over, the first being a smart car. He takes a moment to calm his nerves and then gives a thumbs up, signaling the tiny car to slowly drive forward. The jump goes perfectly and the crowd goes wild. Soon enough, the second vehicle pulls up, a Mini Clubman. With the timer ticking, he takes another moment to get his bearings and once again waves for the car to come. This time, he falters. His stride doesn't feel right and he abandons the jump at the last second. Instead of failing the bet then and there, the show decides to proceed with the third car, a Ford Focus. Koch appears visibly stressed now, but manages to pull off the jump. Now there's the fourth car, an Audi A8. The host Gottschalk informs us that the driver is none other than Samuel's own father. The vehicle begins to slowly accelerate forward as the audience eagerly awaits yet another somersault. But something goes wrong here. The cameras seem to miss whatever happened, but they do catch the audience's reactions.
Sofort den Arzt, bitte! Sofort ein Arzt!
Martina!
When they pan back around, Samuel is completely splayed out on the floor, unmoving. Medics rush in and the program instantly seems to fall apart. Nobody has any idea what to do. Gottschalk and his co-host just pace around awkwardly.
Ist er sofort wieder aufgesprungen?
Sagt uns, ob alles okay ist, bitte.
So.
The cameras pan over the audience and we can hear muffled conversations accidentally picked up by the microphones until the broadcast is eventually cut off entirely. The cameras may not have caught it, but the audience sure did. When Samuel had made his fourth jump, he rotated slightly too early, leading to his head hitting the windshield of the oncoming car. Medics rushed him to the Dusseldorf University Hospital. Doctors would discover that he had fractured 4 cervical vertebrae and even lacerated a carotid artery. The arterial tear would bleed internally, flowing into the spinal canal where it began compressing his spinal cord. He'd end up being flown to the Swiss Paraplegic Center, where he'd be analyzed by Chief Physician Dr. Michael Baumberger, who'd give a chilling statement to the press.
He will never walk normally again. He will not have a normal life like that of a person without an injury.
But Samuel didn't just lose the ability to walk. The internal bleeding had completely destroyed his spinal cord, resulting in him becoming tetraplegic, meaning he had no sensation nor movement in all 4 limbs and his torso. He'd end up spending 3 months on his back with his head being held still by a metal vise as he painstakingly learned how to breathe again on his own. He'd spend an entire year in the hospital. While Koch was enduring an extremely painful and psychologically debilitating recovery, the German public was busy reacting to the accident. Thomas Gottschalk would resign as host of Wetten, Das, and the program promised to overhaul their safety standards, but ultimately suffered a severe decline in ratings in the years following the incident. The ordeal didn't stop there though. Samuel's accident would result in a long-lasting legal battle over whether or not his injury was considered a workplace accident. If it was, he'd be entitled to far greater financial compensation and even a state-funded pension. He and his family would argue that performing for a public broadcaster constituted a form of public service and therefore should be considered work. After a lengthy process involving many hurdles and setbacks, the courts would ultimately rule in 2025, a full 15 years after the incident, that Samuel's injury wasn't in fact a workplace accident, but there may be grounds for coverage as an uninsured entrepreneur injured by a third party. That third party they're referring to, by the way, is Samuel's own father. Not one to be held back by being completely paralyzed below the shoulders, Koch would go on to have a career as a somewhat prominent actor, appearing in many German-language TV shows, movies, and plays. Wetten, Das would end up going off the air in 2014, but it would end up getting a reboot in 2021, and it's still running to this day, minus the dangerous stunts and potential workplace accidents. Speaking of workplace accidents, picture this. You've just gotten home from a hard day at the office. There's only one thing you're looking forward to: sitting down to watch television while eating a fine TV dinner. One problem: you forgot to feed the cat. And now, he's taken matters into his own hands. There's a reason why you shouldn't leave a fat cat alone with lasagna, just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, Morgan & Morgan has been doing one thing and one thing only: fighting for the people, with a track record that speaks for itself. When you've received over $30 billion for your clients, you know exactly what it takes to get people the compensation they truly deserve. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is like hiring an army to go into battle. They've got more than 1,000 lawyers and 100 offices nationwide. If you're injured by someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. Not all law firms are the same. Hire the wrong one, and you may be beat before you even start. If you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Remember, their fee is free unless they win. For more information, you can go to forthepeople.com/feral. Thank you to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. In the end, Samuel Koch was undoubtedly lucky to still be alive, considering the severity of his injuries. The rest of the people we're about to talk about, not so much. Today's video is a surprisingly international one. Each case takes place in a different country. The one thread between them is that they all involve game shows, a format of television that's been around since the very inception of the medium. Game shows, unlike other forms of TV, present unique opportunities for things to go wrong in spectacular ways. Not only is the genre based around unpredictable outcomes, it also involves bringing on members of the public, who aren't always vetted as well as they should be. And of course, as we've just seen, big stunts that often involve said members of the public are a key part of many game shows. Put all this together and you have a form of TV that's been rife with controversy since the very beginning. Some scandals amount to nothing more than accusations of cheating, but others are much darker. Before we jump into the next topic, I want to take a second and tell you about this little music project I just put out. Feral One. It's the first Hi-Fi collection of music I've made since starting YouTube, and it also contains my outro music, which I'm always getting asked about. I played every instrument and produced everything myself. If you're into shoegaze, alternative rock, 90s indie, you might enjoy it. I'll link it down below. In 2005, one of the Philippines' most popular shows premiered for the first time, Wowowee. It was instantly a huge hit. Much like Wetten, Das, the program presented itself as a variety show, with everything revolving around different game show style segments. The difference with Wowowee, however, was its exploitative nature. The program would set up shop in the poorest regions of the Philippines, making sure to always tell the audience how they were doing a great service to the impoverished contestants they would bring on. It brings to mind all those online content creators that film themselves giving money to the homeless, but Wowowee took this idea a step further by not only exploiting the destitution of their contestants, but also by making them compete for the payout. The show would later go through a scandal when viewers learned that some of the games on the program were rigged, meaning that producers were exploiting poor people and then trying to weasel out of giving them any sort of compensation. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. By 2006, Wowowee was already massively popular in the Philippines, especially among the more destitute segments of the population. It represented an opportunity to escape poverty, one that proved to be irresistible. Viewers would be excited to learn that the show was planning something special for its 1-year anniversary episode. The usual top prize of 1 million pesos, more than 5 times the average yearly salary in the country, was unchanged, but the program added more prizes into the mix, including 2 houses, 2 passenger jeepneys, which are kind of like independently run bus services, multiple taxis, and an extra cash prize donated by overseas Filipino workers who were fans of the show, which increased the total amount of the cash prize to 2 million pesos, roughly $30,000 US. By the way, I think it's pretty telling that a large part of these prizes involve equipment specifically intended for starting the sorts of small businesses that often lift people out of poverty. This program really didn't hide what they were trying to do. With the main source of contestants appearing on the show being audience members who were picked on the spot, the producers anticipated the studio audience to swell dramatically for this special event. To accommodate the influx of people, they opted to film the anniversary episode in the PhilSports football stadium in Pasig City, which had an estimated capacity of 19,000, 4 times more than the show's usual 5,000 audience members. Weeks before the event, the program's network, ABS-CBN, would run an extensive advertising campaign, persuading viewers to show up to the stadium for the chance to win big on February 4th. 5 days before the show was set to air, viewers were already turning up outside the stadium. It wasn't unusual behavior. The producers often saw a few fans show up days before a show in hopes of being far enough in the line to secure a spot in the audience. But people just kept joining the line. Some of them had come from hundreds of kilometers away. One fan would tell the news,
"We're very poor. I waited for days outside to try our luck. This is a rare chance for us to win 1 million pesos.
2 days before the event, and the queue had now grown to tens of thousands of people, and it stretched around the entire stadium. For whatever reason, the network opted to not get any help from the police, instead relying on a small security staff to manage the enormous crowd of people. Despite things already getting out of hand, the network continued on TV to try and persuade even more people to show up. It's the night before the broadcast. The crowd has now grown to a whopping 30,000 people, 50% over the stadium's capacity. The front of the line was situated by the LRP gate on Captain Henry Javier Street, which connected to the stadium using a narrow downward sloped driveway, only intended for vehicles. The only thing holding people back was a small steel barrier, and the crowd was pressed in shoulder to shoulder in this slim passageway. A security guard comes out and announces to the crowd that at 6 a.m., some people would be let in, but not everyone would be admitted. This instills a sense of urgency in the attendees who had already been waiting for several days with inadequate access to food, water, and basic hygiene facilities. People began to worry that they may not make it into the stadium, and their efforts and time would be for nothing. Just as the gates were scheduled to open, a producer comes out and makes a fatal mistake. He tells the crowd that only the first 300 people in line would receive tickets that would qualify them to possibly compete in the show. This drove the crowd into a frenzy. Everyone started pushing forward, trying to get further ahead in the line. The security guards attempt to reinforce the steel barrier, but it was no use. The people at the front get pushed into it so hard that it collapses, and the entire mass of people surges forward, right into the downward sloping driveway. People start falling like dominoes, but the crowd still just keeps moving forward. Soon medics would arrive on the scene, but it would take them 2 hours to make it through the mass of people to reach the dead and injured. More ambulances would arrive on scene, but they would have difficulty even reaching the stadium with most of the crowd still standing outside. The police would get involved to try to disperse the horde of people, but surprisingly, most fans refused to give up their spot in line. They persisted in wanting to enter the arena, and many attendees even insisted that the show go on despite being informed of the tragedy that had just unfolded in front of them, a true measure of the level of desperation felt by the average fan of this program. It would take Willie, the host of the show, being joined by the vice president of the network, taking the stage and announcing that the program was cancelled to actually get the crowd to disperse. In place of the game show, ABS-CBN would instead air live coverage of the disaster response. After all was said and done, 73 people would lose their lives in this tragedy, with a further 608 sustaining injuries. 69 of the deceased were women, mostly middle-aged or elderly. The majority of them were jobless and hailed from the poorest parts of Manila and nearby provinces. Homicide charges would eventually be brought against 17 individuals, including the show's host Willie, who would later be cleared of all wrongdoing. The 16 others wouldn't face any criminal convictions either. Wee would continue to air after this tragedy and would only encounter more controversies as the years went on, with it mostly being remembered for its exploitative and shady practices when it was finally cancelled in 2010. The Ultra Stampede, as it would later be called, is remembered now as being the deadliest disaster to ever occur as a result of a game show. Alright, we're once again hopping continents, this time to South America, where we'll learn about yet another tragedy that played out because of a game show. In 2007 in Colombia, a TV producer would come up with a very interesting idea for a game show. It was called Nada Más que la Verdad, or in English, Nothing But the Truth. The idea was simple. A contestant would be brought in before the show was to be recorded, and they'd be subjected to an invasive polygraph test involving up to 150 very personal questions. The answers and polygraph results would be recorded, and the producers would comb through them to choose 21 questions to use for the show. Once on the air, the contestant would merely have to answer the selected questions truthfully. They'd always start light and become more personal and private as they went on. Their family members would have to sit on stage with them, and the questions were often designed to stir up some interpersonal drama. But if a contestant was willing to spill their sauciest beans on TV, they could walk away with the grand prize. That's all there was to this show, which became an instant hit in Colombia and would soon make its way to 47 different countries as an adaptable format. It eventually hit the country of Peru in 2012, resulting in a game show called El Valor de la Verdad, the Value of Truth. It was a straight adaptation and didn't stray at all from the format set by its Colombian predecessor. It was scheduled to debut during the onset of a golden age in Peruvian television, with production budgets increasing dramatically and many international formats making their way to the country for the first time. Needless to say, there was a lot of hype behind EVDLV, evidenced by the primetime Saturday night slot the broadcaster planned to debut it in. For the very first episode, the producers chose a woman named Ruth Talia to be the first ever contestant, a call center employee who lived in the capital of Lima. She would appear on the show alongside her parents and her boyfriend Brian. Over the hour-long show, all of Ruth's secrets would be revealed on TV. It started slow, with Ruth admitting that she had a nose job. Then she reveals that she was ashamed of her Andean roots. Things heat up further, with her telling everyone that she was only with her boyfriend until something better came along, and that she never actually worked at a call center. She was actually a dancer at a nightclub. After revealing that she had twice accepted money in exchange for sex, she would decide to stop answering questions. She may not have won the grand prize of 19,000 sol, but she did manage to walk away with 15,000, the equivalent of almost $6,000 American. It was a stunning set of revelations, one that would instantly skyrocket the ratings of EVDLV. While Ruth would be photographed happily accepting a check for the amount of her winnings, behind the scenes, things were a little different. Family members and distant relatives alike would call Ruth to express their shame for the things she had said, and Ruth would later confide in her mom that her thoughts had been leading her down some pretty dark paths. She'd essentially stopped leaving the house. Things were also bad for her boyfriend Brian, who was essentially labeled as a cuckold on national TV. Strangers would even start making fun of him in public. On September 12th, just 2 months after the show aired, Ruth would inexplicably fail to return home one day. Her parents would report her as missing the next day, but the police weren't of much help. They saw this as yet another case of a working-class individual going missing in the massive, sprawling city of Lima. Her family would start a media campaign to try and track her down. They were worried that her declining mental state had led her to take drastic and fatal action. With the success of the show, a media frenzy would ensue. A news team would be permanently stationed outside the family home, and while the media may have been tasteless in their reporting, the resources and exposure they provide the family were of great help. Ruth's parents would be driven by the network to various hospitals and morgues to search for their daughter, and they'd even bring her to Peru's presidential palace to make their case to the highest office in the country. That latter trip would compel the police to start taking this case seriously. After working with the family for a few days, a person of interest would finally be labeled Brian Romero, Ruth's boyfriend. He'd even be interviewed live on TV while he was a suspect, reporting to the audience that he doesn't remember if he saw Ruth on the night she disappeared because he was drunk. A few hours after that broadcast, Brian would come clean to the police. On September 11th, he had been waiting in a car with his uncle for Ruth to get off the bus near her house. When she was alone, they snatched her and brought her into the car. They'd then bring her out to a plot of land on the rural outskirts of Lima, which is where she would take her final breath. The police would then take Brian up to this plot of land, which was owned by his uncle. The media would follow, and that night, every national station in the country would broadcast the recovery of her body live on air. Every station, that is, except one. One network opted instead to run their usual Saturday night primetime program, El Valor de la Verdad. The courts would later find that Brian and his uncle had murdered Ruth specifically to steal the winnings she earned on the game show. Both will be sentenced to life in prison. Oddly enough, the sentence will be reduced in 2021 to 33 years for Brian and 30 years for his uncle. EVDLV would be tainted from its first episode, and they'd soon pivot to a more lighthearted format featuring celebrities answering embarrassing questions rather than revealing life-ruining secrets for everyday people. They dedicate all subsequent episodes to Ruth's memory. This case would evoke a conversation about media ethics. Some people assert that the show is in some part responsible for Ruth's death by facilitating a very particularly cruel form of public humiliation for both her and her partner. While I do think that the whole idea behind the program was no doubt mean-spirited, I'm not sure if I agree that the show held any actual responsibility for Brian's actions. I would like to hear what you guys think though. We've got one more case for today. This one takes us to a pretty familiar place for the majority of my audience, the United States of America, and it revolves around a show that likely requires no introduction, Family Feud. Yeah, you know what this is. Two families try to guess the studio audience's top answers to survey questions, while Steve Harvey gives a confused look to the camera anytime anybody says anything even remotely uncouth. The format's unique and fun, and it's no wonder why it's performed so well over the 50 years it's been on the air. I've definitely seen my fair share of Family Feud in my life, and you probably have as well. The show's been facing some criticism recently for how repetitive it's become, and while I haven't personally seen it in years, I know exactly what people are talking about. Every episode just kind of plays out in the exact same way. It all boils down to Steve Harvey reacting with astonishment to the vulgar answers of contestants. I'd say it firmly sits in the category of zombie TV, alongside shows like The Simpsons or Family Guy, programs that always get good ratings no matter what, so the producers don't have any real incentive to innovate or change the incredibly stale but winning format. In 2020 though, something interesting would occur on Family Feud, something that had never happened before. In January of that year, the Bleefnick family would appear on the show. Part of the format includes Steve Harvey introducing each member of a given family and asking them a certain question as an opportunity for the contestants to express their personality. When carrying this out with the Bleefnicks, he would eventually settle on the son, Tim, which would result in this odd exchange.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. I love my wife. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, aren't I?
Yeah. A man stating that he regrets his marital vows isn't really anything out of the ordinary for Family Feud, but there is a distinct lack of a punchline here. It's hard to believe that Tim is making any sort of joke. Another thing to note is that his wife was not present here. He was solo. Just weeks after the show aired, Tim would file for divorce from his wife Becky. A long court proceeding would then ensue, including a tense custody battle for their children. The couple would file for orders of protection from one another, which would both be rejected by the courts, although they would order that the couple stay away from each other's residences except for child exchanges. They'd also order Tim to return his 9mm handgun to his wife, since she had been the one to purchase it, something he refused to do. Over the following months, Becky's friends and family would take note of her escalating fears and paranoia. She was certain Tim was planning to do something horrible to her, sending her sister the following texts.
If something ever happens to me, please make sure the number one person of interest is Tim, as that is who would do something to me. I am scared he will harm me, come after me, or will do something that takes away from my kids, or takes my kids away from me.
In February 2023, Becky underwent surgery and asked Tim to look after their 3 children for a few extra days while she recovered. Tim agreed, and Becky spent a few days alone in her house. she would begin to notice a mysterious figure that was sporadically popping up on her surveillance cameras, one that was riding a bike slowly past her house. On the night of February 23rd, the biker would once again appear, but this time, they wouldn't ride past the house. They instead got off their bike, scaled Becky's fence, climbed up to the second floor of her house, and pried open a window with a crowbar. They'd then chase Becky into the bathroom, where they would shoot her 14 times at close range. I probably don't need to tell you who was holding the gun. Tim made a ton of mistakes and was easily caught by the police. After a swift trial, he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do.
Eventually, the connection would be made that the same Tim Bleefnick that had appeared on Family Feud had later murdered his wife in cold blood, even alluding to his disdain right to the host, resulting in one of the most reasonable Steve Harvey reaction faces we've ever gotten. With the decline in traditional media, I do wonder what the future holds in store for game shows. I think the mantle has somewhat been taken up by creators like Jubilee or I guess even Mr. Beast, but I think there's a certain pizzazz missing from the online iterations of game shows. I have seen a couple videos that compare Beast games to Survivor, so maybe it's as simple as an issue of quality, but I would be curious to hear what you guys think. Are game shows destined to die out with the rest of traditional media? Are we ever going to get proper online game shows that are well made? Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.